Okay, Avery, we just finished up doing the group stage of ESL One Birmingham. So no more waking up at 3:30 in the morning.
Well, yeah, until the other days.
Yeah. We're gonna be doing something else as well, but for now, no more 3:30 mornings. That was our call time. Uh, real rough being on the West Coast for this one. But yeah, you and I just got done casting the group stage of ESL One Birmingham. ESL One Birmingham wrapped up where we had two groups of 6 teams, and the groups ended up being very close between each other, and some surprises certainly came up in this group stage. Some teams got eliminated. You certainly would not have expected to be eliminated. Some teams went through in the upper bracket that you probably didn't expect to see in the upper bracket. We had Falcons and Bet Boom probably from Group A. Pretty, strong teams. They went through the upper bracket in Group A. Talon and Shopify got eliminated in that group. Think that maybe Group A is a little bit more normal. Team Liquid and G2IG went middle of the pack, so they're going to start off in lower bracket of playoffs. But it was Group B that definitely got real wacky. OG ended up on top. Again, a team that was not originally at this tournament is only here because one win. Could not get their visas or whatever sorted fast enough. And so OG was a replacement team. They actually ended up top of the group at a score of 6-4. There was a 4-way tie between Tundra, Xtreme, Heroic, and Team Spirit at 5-5. A 4-way tiebreaker for one spot in the upper bracket, 2 spots in the lower bracket, and 1 spot elimination. And Game and Gladiators got eliminated with a score of 4-6. Game and Gladiators, their troubles just continue, Avery.
Yeah, that team's in trouble. I think it's worse because they won so much.
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't be as bad if they were struggling and then they're struggling slightly less. It's not like they got embarrassed by a average standard, but for them it's an embarrassment. This is by far their worst LAN result, I think, ever in the history of the team. So that trajectory doesn't bode well because it feels, if you're on that team, it's going to feel like you're nosediving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the point at which you got to make a change or change the team atmosphere, ethos, or something. That's a rough position. I mean, the reality is, they're like 2 games away from being upper bracket, but it doesn't feel like that. I mean, it's kind of crazy that last 2 TI finalists, Spirit and Gaming, just eliminated. We're only like 6 months out from that TI. It really shows you how volatile Dota is.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it's like kind of a bad investment. I always say this, but if I were a team owner in esports, like, why would I go in Dota? I mean, I get why you go into it. There's prestige. There's an element of it makes you look like a real serious org, that you might not get elsewhere for the amount it takes to go into that. So if I'm going to invest in esport and I want my org to look legit, what are my options, right? Dota, CSGO, League of Legends, especially if you're a mobile gaming org, which for a lot of the C in China organizations is like, if you're a mobile org, how do you make yourself look more legit? You go in Dota. It's like the cheapest barrier the easiest barrier to entry, I should say. Yeah. Way easier than going into any of the other more like structured ones. But damn, is it like a gamble every day? You have a top team, you go to TI finals, and then 5 months later, you're eliminated at LAN, and you're just like, what the hell is, like, how can we be this bad all of a sudden?
Yeah.
I still don't really fully understand how it's like that in Dota. I feel like it should be more consistent, but I think because the game is constantly being patched, because things are constantly developing, players are always improving or finding new stuff, which forces you to constantly adapt. And that's just such a large energy tank and requirement that I don't think the average person, the average normal human that's not a Android bot or, 16-year-old on Red Bull can keep up with it. Which is why I think the younger players tend to actually do better on average. Like, if you can find a 16-year-old that's the same skill as the 28-year-old, I think that's the biggest advantage the young player gives you. Is that guy is going to spend 12 hours a day playing and drink like 8 monsters and do that for the next 6 years of his life and be totally chill with it. Whereas that 28-year-old ain't doing that shit anymore. Like, it's just not happening. And that means that every month that progresses in Dota, that younger guy has a better chance of coming up with something new, adapting to the changes, and adapting faster than the other guy does. Just because he can play more, he can grind more, he sees more, he has a more malleable brain, so to say. He's not plagued down with 10 years of Dota bullshit, which is an advantage in some ways of like if you're a captain or coach and guiding a team, sure. But when it comes to like raw mechanical skill and keeping up, I think that is one of the things that skews that direction.
Do you think that certain people had it right in the past, like the way OG used to handle it, where they would just go on break and they would just ramp up basically only for TI? Do you think that was kind of the right idea? If being at the top in pro Dota is such a big cost, then isn't it better just to screw around for the first 6 months of the year?
I mean, not really. I mean, that just only worked because the system was kind of flawed, and I think they got away with that without being punished. But the problem is, like, you do that, it's such a high risk reward thing. Like, maybe it worked for that team because they had certain players that needed the time off, otherwise they wouldn't have been able to compete. Okay, sure. But the risk is, like, monumental. You know, that just looks like it worked because they got away with it. But I think 9 times out of 10, your team doesn't practice, you, like, fall out of form, you get there, you can't get back into shape quick enough, then you fail, and then you're just like, what the hell are we doing? We didn't do anything for the whole year, and we failed at TI. We don't get paid. We just wasted an entire year. And the thing is, you can't waste time in Dota, because when you hit your prime, like, how many years do you have to be in your prime in Dota that you can win a LAN? Most people, 1 to 2 years maybe. That's it. The window's that small. Like, you're spending 10 years to get 1 year where you might be on a tier 1 team and be able to compete for a trophy at every LAN you go to in that year. And all those other 9 are like dog shit. So are you gonna, if you hit your prime, are you gonna be like, yeah, let's take half a year off of my prime? You're just fighting against the clock. And it's very rare that you have a player who has a prime, disappears, and comes back. And that's why I respect the people who do make that like return, because goddamn, is it difficult to find a second prime in a Dota career. It means you have to struggle again for another like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I mean,
to get the 1 year.
Seb's out here looking for his third prime, so you know.
Oh no, I mean I feel like he had his 1 prime, to be honest. It was that TI8, TI9 OG. I mean, he obviously played for a long time before that, but I don't think he would consider him hitting his prime during those early periods. You know, he had like some success, Sigma, Int, and whatever, but everybody has like 1 tournament they can go to and, you know, do well. I don't really consider that a prime. I'm saying like you have a solid year where you're contending in everything. And I think he only hit that once, and now he's trying to like get back into it. Obviously, he's still a beast of a player, but even for him, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's just really damn tough. It's not about you falling out of your prime. It's like that prime includes you finding a team that works and other people that work and getting that team to be a contender. And you might only have a year or 2 year window in your entire Dota career of 10 to 15 years where you get that chance and it all comes together. And like, I just think taking half of that off to gamble on, okay, guys, you know, let's hope we win the next TI is like the biggest risk reward deficit I've ever seen. It just worked for that team because, I mean, whatever, man. That team was like, they had God on their side, you know. They probably could have played blind and won somehow. They were just way too good, way too ahead of everybody else on so many things that, you know, sometimes you're just at that point. Yeah. People develop the game in a way and they're so far ahead that it doesn't matter what you do. They're going to win. The advantage is just way too good.
Yeah, those teams come around, and the competition is so high in Dota that everybody learns. So maybe it's less of you falling behind and more so Dota just pushing ahead. Dota is always evolving. It feels like the teams and players are always getting better at what they do. Everybody seems to learn from, certain, every single time there is a champion at the end of the Dota year, and it feels like everybody takes a lesson from that. I feel like OG, it was mentality and team bonding. Feel like there was, I'm not sure what people learned from TI10 spirit. Maybe it was about playing around vision, high ground vision, stuff like that, where they would just always play around their wards. Yeah. There's like mechanic stuff and nerd stuff that you would get from certain TIs.
I mean, TI-10 I think was the one that was the least clear. All the ones before that I remember was like people tried to copy or emulate what that team did to succeed. Um,
Oh, here's another one.
and
This is they didn't get first place, but second place CDEC, right? Aggressive. His play style is a carry,
yeah,
you know,
very iconic.
like move that carry out of the lane, have him actually be active. It was a game changer
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah, I mean, EG copied it, or they were doing something similar with Fear,
Mhm.
and then they won. So people copied them, with this moving carry and a greedy four. That's where a lot of that started, and some of that came from EG copying CDEC, and it goes through the chain. TI6 wings. Everybody, I remember after that event, we formed Team NP, and NP was like, we need to copy what Wings did, and he had his idea of what made them successful, and it was just like, be the nerdiest team possible. I don't know if that was even true. I don't think it was. I don't
what
think.
did people take from Wings other than
Yeah,
holy fuck, these guys are really good at Dota
Well, I
in
think
every way.
the perception. I think the perception was, yeah, they were just super good, and I think part of that was like they had all this small stuff figured out ahead of other people. Like they had all this weird itemization, and were willing to play any hero. And the way they thought about the game was on a higher detail oriented level than everybody else at the time, which allowed them to do these things because they put in more work. And so the perception was like, you need to be a team that works really hard and figures out all these details and knows all this like small nerdy shit that you can work in the game to just play at a high enough level to beat them. And that was what a lot of teams tried to emulate. And then TI7 was just, okay, you got to go find this miracle dude and like
Find your own miracle.
You got a four protect one, with like some Akuro strong captain with like a star player.
Yeah.
People started building teams around that concept.
I think TI going back to EG TI5, I feel like that was the introduction of the pub player more so, right? Sumail came in and won a TI,
Yes,
right? Within basically 6 months or something like that. And I felt like that opened the gates to a lot more to the average pub player, where it used to be this mentality of like, oh, you don't really know what pro Dota is really like,
That was part of it. I think the other big component was the laning. Like that tournament was like Sumail was a beast, but it was because he just auto won every lane. And people looked at that and went like, holy shit. Like the gap that you can create off of just the laning is going way unexploited, right? No other player or team was doing it to that degree. And so if you look there, you're like, why can't I be as good at laning as Sumail? And a lot of people started getting better from that point onward. And then, you go a year down the road and you have like the ESL New York and stuff where all of a sudden you have this guy, No One, who comes out and he's a laning monster, right? That guy was, he was close to Sumail at the time. Sumail wouldn't say so, but from a public perception, he was like, I feel like he was the first mid who came out and said, I'm going to dominate all the other mids just as hard as Sumail does.
Yep.
And he did for like a year. And I think that's part of that. And it made that team really successful. And I think there's always lessons like that. TI-10, I think, was weird because people didn't feel that Spirit were actually better at anything in a sense. Like people didn't look at that team and go like, oh yeah, they did this better than us because they were severe underdogs at that land. Nobody really had them on their radar. They had a really bad group stage initially and then just kind of like barely won every match they needed to get to that next step. And then when you look back on it, it's, oh, like they won the land. They were obviously world-class players. People were looking at Collapse and scouting and being like, this guy's a beast, but they could have easily been eliminated in group stage at that TI. Like they were one series away. And so a lot came together for them. And so people were like, well, what am I supposed to copy? Like, am I supposed to just, okay, guys, like, let's take what Team Spirit did and have a miracle run on the brink of elimination and just like play out of our goddamn minds and have like, the most skilled anime run of all time. I mean, that is something people took away. They started like watching more anime. And I think that amount of anime profile pictures in Dota players increased by like 800% after that land. I'm not even kidding. It was like, holy shit, the power of anime actually compelled them to a victory.
Yeah, WePlay did their Naruto run, or excuse me, Team Spirit did their Naruto run at WePlay, and then they won a TI. Like, oh,
I'm telling you, that was one of the big ones. It's like the memes, power of memes. That team fueled memes, and goddamn did it to get them far. And I mean, obviously, a lot of gameplay stuff they were ahead of the curve on. The warding game, the team fighting game, how they team fight is still something I think teams haven't studied enough or figured out. I think there's remnants of how they developed the team fighting meta that were shown later in Tundra at their TI victory. That is also still understudied and underdeveloped, and I don't know why teams are so far behind on these things. And you see that in the way Falcons play. And it's the reason they're doing well. And that's just a core ideology of the team that it works for them. These things get studied and they get abused. And if the other teams don't study, it's just an innate advantage you have forever. And so some of that got studied out of Spirit and it passed on, which is why I think the fact they came back and won another TI after teams started doing a lot of the stuff they did is like, that's impressive. Because I don't think people studied and figured out OG before their second TI win as much. Or maybe OG was just not as replicable. That's also possible. Like, they had a lot more unique gameplay, I think, in terms of the pace and the synergy and the uniqueness of their players. Like, Thompson and Jerax were just two of the most unique players. You can't really copy some of the stuff they were doing.
Yeah.
Like, you can try and copy what Spirit does. It doesn't mean you'll do it as well, because Yatoro and Collapse are just two of the best players to ever play the game. But you can understand what they're doing and try and emulate it. Like, I think that's harder with OG. So that's also a difference. And that's why I think their win was impressive. Not necessarily more, but just for different reasons. That, like, you know, they didn't go into TI. Was it TI 12 now?
Yeah, TI 12.
These numbers. Like, they didn't go into that TI with crazy innate strategic advantages, I think. They just outplayed everyone.
Yeah.
Just flat out outplayed.
They were just flat out better than anybody else at that tournament. And you could just tell. You could just tell from before the grand final started, it was like, Team Spirit's going to win, man.
Yeah. But they weren't like just crushing team fights because they were the only ones protecting high ground wards over and over and over. Like, you know, that grand finals they play against Gaming. Gaming make that play top against Maposhka Treant. He's just sitting there. He just overgrows like 5 of them. I mean, you're just outplaying kids the whole time. Yep. And that's why that team's so impressive. It's interesting. This stuff gets passed on and developed.
Yeah.
It's still being developed today.
We might have gotten a little sidetracked there, but that leads to, Team Spirit got eliminated in this group stage.
Here they are.
How fast they fell is they made, it was so impressive that they came back and hit another prime. And then 6 months later, they're getting eliminated in groups. They got eliminated in a 4-way tiebreaker so their end score of the group stage was 5-5. They literally tied every other team. They did not lose a series. They did not win a series. They tied all the way through in a 4-way tiebreaker and then proceeded to lose all 3 best of ones. So just...
Yeah, I mean, that's Dota life, right? Yeah. Maybe they win 1 or 2 of those and they make a run in the playoffs. You don't know. But now they're going to go down as a LAN fail. And maybe that team's in a rough spot because there's 2 LANs they kind of bombed out of now. But like, that team's not going to change anybody. You can't, they're too high skilled. They're too good. They know it. They're just in a slump. And that's what I'm saying. That's, to hit your prime is hard.
So you think it's a slump.
World-class players.
You think it's a slump and not them taking it easy after winning TI again.
I don't think that team takes it easy. Like, maybe you take it easy inadvertently because, okay, you won huge lands, you won Riyadh, you won TI. It's not about taking it easy. You're going to just get burnt out to a certain degree. Okay. So maybe the level of intensity and practice and focus drops a little bit because, you're naturally going to be burnt out. Like, you put a huge emotional investment energy into winning those lands. It takes a toll on you.
Toro's got to grow his hair back, forever.
Yeah, exactly. Like, when he shaves it again, then you'll know they're back at 100%. But I think it's not about them all of a sudden just sucking, and everybody understands that. You can't just go from being the Yatoro, that TI-12, there was a conversation, is Yatoro the greatest Dota player ever? Yes. And he has a good argument
he does.
For being like the highest average performing player of all time. Like, who are you going to take to fill that carry slot? Obviously, there's a lot of people who take Miracle or, Ame or whoever. But, like, he's in that conversation. And he has a very good argument for that conversation. And now 6 months later, it's like, you go in Twitch chat and it's just like, Yatoro washed. Yatoro, lol, this guy sucks, feeding every game. Like, you can't be both those things. And obviously, he is not washed. He's an incredible player, and he's still very in his prime and capable. But that says how hard it is to find a team that can maintain that for decent amount of time. Mm-hmm. Even if you have the players, even if you have the confidence, even if you know you can do it because you've won 2 TIs, it's still damn hard to win every lane. It's just not It's too much energy investment.
And another example of that would be Xtreme, who looked like they were going to get eliminated. They started off the day being 3-5. They lost a single game. They would be eliminated. They won their 2-game series. They came back in a really, really close game 1 against Tundra, where they only had like a 15% chance, according to Dota Plus, to be able to win that game. They made the comeback.
Yeah.
Then they win game 2. Then they go into this tiebreaker. Now, the tiebreaker didn't go as well for them, where they did end up losing. I believe they lost one of the first matches. Yeah, they lost against Tundra. So the third game against Tundra, they finally lose to them. But they won the rest of the matches and ended up second, which means they didn't get eliminated, but they didn't end up in the upper bracket. That went to Tundra, who 3-0'd their way through everybody else.
I mean, I think they're happy with that result because they were bottom of that group and looking to be out. So the fact they get to play it at all, pretty good for that team. And honestly, I don't think they mind too much. I feel like it's one of those things where they're either going to like beat everybody or not, you know. I don't think that's a team that necessarily needs upper bracket too badly. Might even do better in the lower bracket. Like, you know, they'll get all these teams that if they win that first series, they'll get all these teams that drop down and they have the confidence because they just want to land. And these other teams are just going to be kind of fumbling.
I will say something about this Xtreme lineup. They do look like, I kind of agree with you here in that they look like a team that could just be, you know, they could at the end of the year and then be the champions of Riyadh or TI or something like that, because something about their play style, something about like they're down but they're never out, you know, they always seem to play for the late game comeback, but they're still skilled enough to be able to, you know, they can win lanes and roll games like that.
I mean, I'll tell you what it is. I'll tell you what it is. It's goddamn ZinQ. It's that motherfucker.
Yeah.
I think that guy, he is the most valuable player in China. And I don't think it's close. This discussion, I will have this discussion every day. I'll make this argument every day. It's always like, oh, Ame, oh, Somnus, all these like all these flashy core players. Yeah, you can get all those guys. You can get the old, you know, Yang and Reunite Elephant. You can get Chalice out there. You can get the legends that are the Ame and even Faith Beyond. You know, Faith Beyond, he's very close for me. That guy is insanely valuable too.
Okay.
But if I'm building a team out of China and I have to take one player first in that draft, I'm taking ZinQ. I'm telling you, I'm taking him. Like, I'm taking him over Ame. I think Ame and Faith Beyond are like close in that top 3, and Somnus is in there too, but I think he is almost irreplaceable. I have never seen a 4 player out of China with the level of mechanical skill he has, the level of decision making he has, and just the instinct for the game. He very much reminds me of Zai when he used to play 4 back in the day. A player that just instinctually understands where he needs to be and the play that needs to be made and can play anything and build anything. And he just makes game-winning plays. Like, it's just, you know, I'm sure you can analyze the guy and be like, oh, maybe his lane's not as good as somebody else, and he'll lose some lanes, and he'll look real dumb in some moments and make some clowny plays. But the guy just wins you games, and on top of that, he makes your team atmosphere good. We've seen this in the cams. We've heard it in the interviews. That guy brings people up emotionally and energy-wise. That is insanely valuable. It's pretty rare in Dota. I think it's been pretty rare in the Chinese scene. To get all of that in one player is just... I'm telling you, that guy is... Like, there's a reason Azure Ray won with him. There's a reason XG are doing well now. There's a reason LGD did well for him. Every team this guy goes to does well, regardless of who he's surrounded with. Like, what's the common link, motherfuckers? It's this guy. It's not Ame. It's not Somnus. It's not whoever.
It's not Jao.
You know, these guys are insanely good. Yeah, it's this motherfucker. I'm telling you, there's something about him. Like, I go back to that Azure Ray game at Kuala Lumpur where they get the reverse sweep. There was, I think it was game 3 or 4. He played Nyx Assassin, and that game was like. You know, you can go and look at that replay or look at that Dota. And I don't think there's any other player who asked for Nyx Assassin there because he got dumped on for like 20 minutes. Like, this hero is almost unplayable in the meta. It wasn't even that good a Nyx game. He got owned in the laning phase, huge liability. And then, like, what happens, right? He just finds this little casual pickoff randomly. You know, he gets one hero with a little vendetta kill, and then all of a sudden, he has like a 2-man impale and gets like 4 of the mind flares off in a fight, and suddenly he has a Dagon too. And then all of a sudden he kills Durachio again with like some random, you know, fine with this Dagon too. And they just win the game. And then you're like, what a Nyx performance. And it's like, I can't explain this. There are just some players that instinctually understand where to be and what to do in a Dota game, and he is one of them. Zai is another. These guys are invaluable. They are absolutely invaluable because they are always a championship player, almost no matter what. Doesn't matter what the meta is. Doesn't matter what the heroes are. Doesn't matter what happens in the patch. Just put that guy on my team. Like, I'm taking him every time.
And we're talking about a player who is still ended up in the lower bracket. And you had so many good things to say about Team Spirit who got eliminated. So it goes to show, Dota just has a lot of sick teams and sick players who are doing a lot of work right now, including OG, who managed to top out that group, which is pretty crazy considering the fact they weren't even invited to this tournament. Though I think you and I were both in agreement that OG was coming. They were going into this tournament a legitimate threat. I think we both thought that they were a legit threat. When what was it, Elite League or Dream League, whatever? I think it was Dream League, right? Where they went out of group. They made it to this. It was Dream League. They made it to the second groups, right? And they didn't make playoffs, but I felt like they were a better team than some of the teams in playoffs.
Oh, I think that team has something going for them. I mean, it's Seb. I think Seb and Ari have been pretty, like, they're improving a lot. I think they're probably the support duo that's improved the most over the last 6 months. If you're watching teams, like, Seb has come a long way. Obviously, he's an incredibly smart player. He's only going to get better on that role. And I think Ari is someone who also is working very hard and continually improving. And I think that team has something that's clicking for them. I don't know exactly what it is yet. I think we have to see more results. But there's also something that's like doesn't click on that team. And I'm not sure I know what that is either. It's very mysterious. Like, there's just something that I don't know if it's the communication thing with Whisper or maybe just like a core synergy problem between the three of them. You have two guys from South America, then the rest of the team's European, and then one guy doesn't even speak that much English. And then you have Tomato, who comes in with his own ideas, who's played in NA for most of his career, or SA. And then maybe it's just like a culture and idea clash thing where it looks great when it works and it looks really bad when they're not on the same page. I feel like that's part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say some of their players are that way, right? I think both BZM and Tomato can look like the best players in the world in very specific games and very specific situations, and then other times, you put talking about the BZM show one game, and then where's BZM the next, So
yeah, maybe it's that. Maybe their team is just has a very extreme range of where they're going to end up. Like, they have very explosive core players, but core players that can also just go 0-10, and you're like not even surprised. Just like, that was a bad game for them, and the bad games are really bad. The good games are really good. So on any given day, they can beat anybody. Any given day, they can lose to anybody. That's going to be the biggest component for them to figure out. If they can figure that out, if they can raise their floor, then I think that team becomes pretty scary. But raising the floor is the mixed bag in Dota. It can be very difficult, and it can take a lot of time, and sometimes teams don't have that time. You're under a lot of pressure to perform under a certain time interval, and that's a tough position.
Now, looking back at Group A, Chinese Dota is coming back in full force. I mean, we just saw Xtreme win Elite League. We had Azure Ray win Kuala Lumpur. And now we've got a second Chinese team that makes it through to playoffs, which is G2IG, who have been, I feel like, the third team in China. They've had some kind of lackluster results, but showing maybe a bit more promise as they make it to playoffs with a score of 5-5. I think just all around, they've kind of looked better.
Yeah, they did look better at the start, and then I think they found some of their old problems again. And now they're looking a bit more hit or miss to me. I was like impressed with how they started this.
Yeah, I mean, they beat Bet Boom 2-0, but you lose Talon 0-2. Like, what happened?
Yeah, I don't know, man. That team is just wild. I think Baboka is just a very weird player. I feel like every team that guy is on has some stuff going for it and some stuff definitely not going for it. I was looking at those. Did you see that infographic that was like the amount of days since
the last tier 1 win, like, and number it's one? Not Arteezy, it's Baboka. That blew me away. I thought it was Arteezy for sure.
At like 2,600 days or something. Like, what? Like, how is that possible? That is a disgustingly high number. The numbers on that were disgusting, by the way. I mean, that, you do the math, you're like, well, that doesn't sound too bad. And then it's like 8 years. You're like, oh my God. Like,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. And like, Arteezy hasn't won one in 7 years almost. I think the last one was still Manila Masters or something, which
Yeah.
is ridiculous.
So they must have been talking about, so he's had other first places, but they said tier 1, and that's Dota Asia Championships. So DAC 2017, where IG 3-0'd OG in the finals.
Yeah, so it's 7 years almost.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's my point, right? I think we're talking about primes and players hitting this and like what you're getting in your team. And I think Baboka can be that player. But I feel like it's also been a long time for him to get that result and kind of reprove himself. And that adds a toll, man. Like that just eats away at you at a certain point. It's like, do you doubt yourself? Does your team doubt you? Like how many, you don't necessarily have a better option, but is this guy going to re-hit his peak at some point? Like the last time that guy won a LAN, if you remember, was that DAC, he was playing Ricky and Monkey King support.
Yeah.
Like that is a crazy meta to go back to. That was also the most broken version of those heroes that's probably ever existed. Like that might have been the most broken 4 position I've ever seen. Monkey King on release can buy Basher and AoE chain stun your entire team.
Yeah, and that was still good Earth Spirit back then, which was another hero that he was rocking at that time. It was like those 3 heroes. It was just every game.
So he had a lot going for him.
Yeah.
Like again, you win lands, you're ahead of people on something, and they were ahead on that, and that was a huge boost. But are you going to get that again? Probably not. So you're just going to have to step up your game. And I guess it's been 7 years. He's been close. He's been close on a couple of those, but it's hard, man. It's tough.
I just opened up one of the VODs real quickly, and I saw I was on the grand finals panel with Red Eye, Peter, and Purge.
Yep, there you go.
And then the casters were Toby and Merlini. So, times have changed. Times have changed.
Yeah, I mean, I played at that LAN, and I remember watching them win with Burning Wraith King, going like, what the hell is happening, And then I got kicked after that tournament. So that was a sad LAN for me. But
Team NP went 1-3-1 in groups. You guys beat IG Vitality. You actually went 1-1 with IG. But
yeah, we weren't terrible.
You guys had a third place tiebreaker. Why did you have a third place tiebreaker? For seeding? It must have been seeding, because you both end up in the lower bracket anyway. And then you have a best of 1 that you play against Team VGJ.
Yep. Rough times.
Damn, I forgot Aggressive was still playing at that time. He was on VGJ.
I don't even remember that game, to be honest. I have no recollection, but that's what happens when you get old.
Yeah, fair enough. Anyway, focusing back on ESL on Kuala Lumpur, not Kuala Lumpur, Birmingham, the other ESL one.
Confusing yourself, bro.
What are the final teams we talking about? Oh, Liquid. So Falcons at Bet Boom end up 6-4, tying out with Liquid, who are also 6-4. So no surprise, all 3 of those teams, top 2 teams. One of them's gonna end up on the outs. It's this time it's a 3-way tiebreaker where Liquid end up on the outs. They just can't clutch it in the end. So they are going to be starting off in the lower bracket. Not the same troubles as Gaming Gladiators. Maybe they'll make a lower bracket run, but it does seem like their performance is not as consistent as it was last year.
No, I mean, there's no way they're happy with it right now, and they shouldn't be. It's a team that's going to work really hard to get their level up to where they know it can be. They're going to be the hardest on themselves of anybody, so it's not even me calling them out. I'm sure they're calling themselves out, and they can still make a run here, but they have fallen a little short recently at a lot of these opportunities to, get that extra match, get to that finals, get through this tiebreaker, these types of things. And it's starting to raise the question of what isn't working for them, or what are other people doing better. Maybe it's just time for 33 to gel. Maybe he has to have some time to figure out how to captain, because he hasn't done that in a very, very long time. And it's a huge role on a team.
Yeah.
Very underappreciated role, very hard one to fill. Very important one. You can't just say, oh, we're like, this guy's the captain, and then it just goes. You need a guy who's confident to fill that role and knows and has a direction of how to do that. You can do it in a lot of different ways, but he has to figure that out. And maybe he just hasn't had a lot of time to figure that out. Most of the ways you figure out how to be a captain are when shit goes wrong, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's like, and you need the experience of knowing how to fix a team when it's broken to gain confidence in yourself that, like, okay, if something goes wrong, I'm going to know how to fix it. When things are going right, I mean, it's easy to be a captain when your team's just winning and beating everybody. It's like, okay, guys, let's go beat them, you know? And then you just have to think about strategy. That's the dream. But when all this stuff is broken, when people aren't playing well, when the drafts aren't working, when, you know, communication's bad, when people's emotional states are rough, that stuff is like, when you have to fix all that and you're trying to fix all that shit, and then you also have to out-strategize and out-draft people, that's when that job is at its toughest. And, you know, maybe some of that is them figuring that out with a new roster, and him being a new captain isn't as experienced to get that done as quickly. It might just take more time, more rough spots to figure it out, more time for Blitz to kind of analyze it and help him figure it out and get that mechanism working together, right? Because he's a big core component of that team. So those are things that take time. And again, people, when you're on a team like that with a big org and big expectations and big X players that you have to fill their shoes, that's a lot of pressure to get that done. Where you're like, you know, give me a year to figure it out. It's like a year in Dota, bro. Dota even going to exist in a year?
Yeah.
Like, come on, we got to figure it out. I can give you 1 week. It's like, okay. You know, that's how it feels sometimes. Like, I need 6 months to figure this out. Okay, you got 6 days. I'll meet you back here next Monday. And it's like, what do you want this guy to do, you know? I think that's part of it. But they got to figure it out. They got to figure it out. Because they are more capable than what they're showing, for sure.
Two other teams, Falcons, I mean, I think the story for them is just they're looking a lot more mortal, right? That like they a month ago or 2 weeks ago, they look like the kings of the patch. No one could touch them. And then they go and lose the Elite League finals. And now they're coming to this tournament and they're not getting clean wins. They're getting 1-1s against everybody in their group. Liquid, BetBoom, G2IG, and even Shopify all managed to get a 1-1 over Falcons. So they no longer look like the top dogs anymore. Though we'll see once the best of threes occur, maybe they'll have a revitalization and, you know, maybe they just crush the playoffs. But they do look more mortal than they ever have. And I think that I feel like both Insania and Quinn, when I was talking to them, they were alluding onto that. They were like, Falcons, they're not going to stay on top for long. And you said that too. You can't stay on top in Dota forever.
That team is honestly one of the most unique teams I've ever seen in Dota in terms of a winning team. I don't think people realize how weird they are. Because they kind of just appear to be like a dominating team and they have young players that are super skilled and whatever. But the mix that team is honestly one of the weirdest to be a winning team. Normally when you have a winning team, there's a very coherent ethos and ideology that brings everybody together, and you have a lot of coherency, you have a lot of homogeneity as much as you can get in a team. This is why national teams generally perform better. Like, you just have more cultural homogeneity. It's people getting on the same page easier. There's less barriers to cross. That team has like an insane mix of cultures, an insane mix of people coming from different places, different past experiences, an insanely different outlook on the game. You even hear these guys talk in an interview of like, you know, Skeeter came in with these Tundra mentalities of, I'm not going to be loud on social media.
Don't show personality.
And then
be more
robotic,
and then
day one,
just focus on being a
day
nerd.
One, these guys are just like, throw out the fucking chat, just throwing shit on the walls, just trash talking everybody. And now all of a sudden he's on Twitter like, I'm embracing this, you know. But I think that's insane to me. Like you can bring these elements together and make them work so quickly. Then you bring in like AUI, who has his own viewpoints.
I mean, you pretty much, I mean, Skeeter said that the people who set the culture for Tundra was 33 and AUI. So you have the guy who set that culture now coaching these young guys in Malrine and ATF who have the exact opposite approach of him. When it comes
That's why it's such a weird mixing. You know, it's like these two oceans meeting. One's, you know, you have salt water meeting fresh water, or whatever. And this team is successful off it, which points to they're doing a lot of things incredibly right. And the players are incredibly skilled. They have some of the best players in the world, undoubtedly. The part that I think is the most interesting about that team to me, and why I say they're the weirdest team I've seen be like a, you know, tier 1 consistent championship team, is I think they appear on paper to be the most susceptible to a patch change
Yes.
of any team I've ever seen. Like, I don't think it's close. I think, you can look at like the last year of like Gaming Gladiators, who won all these lands. And then with part of that, you're like, okay, if Pangolish get nerfed a bit, if some of the Duraccio heroes get nerfed a bit, if Ace loses some of his aura builders, and some of that stuff has happened, they're going to take a step back. But it wasn't like they were incredibly dependent. They had a lot of ways to win games. It's just they figured out the way at every tournament they wanted to win, and then eventually defaulted to that. This team is like, what they're going to pick. The hero pools of the players. They're posting them on Twitter and telling you, I just got another Grandmaster tier. Here's my 10th. I'm going to pick one of these 10. You can't stop me. And it's just like in your face and aggressive. And you can't help but sit there and be like, what happens if like Mars, Timbersaw, Slardar, Viper get nerfed? What if Razor, DK, Pango, Lena get nerfed? Like, does this team just lose 20% of their viability? Like, does it collapse?
Like, what if there's less farm on the map, so Amar can't be as greedy in the offlane position as he wants to be? Yeah.
And it's just like staring you in the face. And I've never seen that before. Like, you always have these ideas of a patch might hurt a team, but this team is like, it has to hurt them. It has to. This patch is going to destroy them when it comes. Ice Frog is going to ruin ATF's dreams, just like what happened at Singapore TI, where he had to play Sand King and looked like the worst offlaner at that event. Like, why isn't that going to happen again? It's just in the back of your mind. And then at the same time, well, that's there. You have this component of like the old Tundra ideas of how to team fight and how to itemize and play the game and AUI's influence and all this stuff that is the same as what was working for them in Tundra and is still ahead of a lot of people and still very good. And it just produces these beautiful team fights and superb laning and itemization. And they look like a 10 out of 10 team in all these areas. And you're like, of course they're a championship team because they have all this going for them,
Yeah.
It's like devil and angel. And then, but what if they nerf Timber? This guy can't play anything. He can't play anything. And then, you watch him just like make these outplays that are absolutely absurd, and like Maureen's planting trees and killing people. And it's
all
like,
chatting and tipping. And
yeah. And it's like, dude, they're not going to get patched out. But then you wake up, you're like, yeah, but they have to get patched out. He has no hero pool. So I don't know. They're just such a weird team, dude. It's like, I just don't even know what's going to happen to them for the rest of the year. Yeah. It's just such an unknown. And I think I have more doubt almost for them than I should. Like, I look at a team like XG and I have more faith XG at the end of the year are going to be better just because they have like Ame and Jinkyu who can play any hero.
Yeah. XM's got a specific style, but it's like, he still has enough versatility. I mean, we saw him play Storm Spirit today, right? Which is his best Spirit hero for sure, but it goes against part of his identity as kind of like a turret mid laner, just like stand and deliver kind of guy with the sniper Viper type heroes. So yeah,
yeah, maybe he's the most restricted, but just my perception, my gut read is they're like pretty patch resilient. Like, I feel like XG is going to be able to play on any patch, and the things that make them a good team are kind of just like their player synergy and XXS making a huge leap this year, and them finding XM who Ame has faith in, and they believe in each other, and they believe in Ame to carry a game. And like, these things exist on Falcons for sure. But it's like I said, there's also this perception of just like, yeah, but if that patch hits them hard, man, like
if that patch comes
hit
around
real hard,
yeah.
I don't know. I just don't know. It's such a weird winning team. I have faith in them. I think they're incredibly good, but damn, is it weird to think about them compared to a lot of these like past really top tier teams.
All right, we're going late. One more team to talk about. And I feel a little bad about this, but I don't actually want to talk about the team, as in style, strategy, anything else. Bet boom. I want to talk about the bug abuse. So, for those of you guys who don't know, they played Shadow Demon. There is a bug right now with Shadow Demon that when you get the shard and you have a skill point, you can put it into Demonic Cleanse. And it will level up Demonic Purge. So you can have level 3 ultimate, basically whatever you want. Very obvious bug that is clearly not intended in the game. And Save used it in one of their group stage matches. Now, they lost that game anyway. So, you know, a lot of controversy, I think, goes away purely because they lost. So it's like, okay, whatever. You give them a draft time penalty. But if they had won that game, then I think you almost have to make a bigger decision about whether or not they forfeit, you know, that match, right? But that bug abuse, do you think that constitutes as cheating?
Depends on your definition of cheating, I suppose. Do I think it's cheating?
I mean,
Okay, let's start light. Thing to do, you know. Like,
is it bad sportsmanship? Yes, obviously.
Yes, obviously. Is he knew what he was doing. He did it. He gained a competitive advantage.
He did not level it once. He leveled it at 10, 11, and 12. He had a level 3 ultimate when you're supposed to have a level 2 ultimate. He had a level 2 ultimate when you're supposed to have a level 1 ultimate.
He clearly did it.
Right, he clearly did it.
I don't know. It's hard for me to understand because I feel like if I ever found something like that, I would never use it in an official.
Yeah.
Like, even if someone told me I could, I wouldn't. You know, I don't want to beat someone because I, like, abuse some stupid broken mechanic in the game. I want to beat someone because I'm a better team.
Yeah.
So I don't really understand how the mentality gets there.
A mechanic that also may not make a difference in the game, right? It's like...
Yeah, I mean, that part I think is kind of irrelevant. Like, at the point where you're abusing broken mechanics, it's like,
okay,
you're already down that slippery slope.
Sure.
Me. You've made a decision of, I'm going to alter this game on the competitive level to gain an advantage, even though I know I shouldn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part of the mentality I don't understand. Because I think there's a lot of people who would never do that. It's just against their code, or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And he did it, and I don't know where that comes from, personally. Like, I just don't know how that is worth it, or what the logic is. Maybe the logic is just like, it's in the game and anybody can use it, so I'm just going to use it.
That is the most common thing that I saw was like, it's in the game, which is an argument that has been used for a lot of things in Dota.
Yes.
It's in the game, therefore it's fair play, which, yes, that is true for a lot of things. I think there's a lot of weird mechanics and interactions that go on in Dota. Some of them intended, some of them not intended, some of them just exist, and Valve accepts. But this one is pretty clearly not intended. You know it's not intended.
So the thing is, with bugs, you're allowed to use, like, when you find a bug, if it is something that there's a very gray area, whether it's an intentional bug or not, and if you tell Valve will tell you whether it's usable or not. There have been bugs in the past that they've told you can use them. We're going to fix them at a later point, but it's in the game now and you can use them and everybody can use them, whatever.
Every TI, they have this thing where they tell the players, like, come to us. If you have any questions about, like, some sort of interaction, potential bug, come to us. We will not share it with anybody else. And if we think it's not a bug, if we think it's legit, it's meant to be in the game, we won't share that. You just come to and run it by us, and we won't spoil that competitive advantage. But if it is a bug, we will tell you not to use it, and we'll let other people know not to use it.
Yes. So, you know, where does this fall in that category? I think it's pretty clear.
It's super obvious.
If you told Valve about this spell, they're going to tell you not to do it because it's not supposed to. It's not like a weird interaction. It's just a bug. It's an actual bug. You gain an unfair competitive advantage. You're abusing it. Mm-hmm. So that's where I think it's very clear as day. Like, what the hell are you doing, honestly? Like, how is this ever worth the risk? How is this not a violation of competitive integrity? How can you hold your head up high? I don't understand any of these things. It is bizarre. This team always has some controversial shit going on. It's ridiculous. Like, just play the game, man. Just play it straight up. I don't think it's that hard. You know, the thing is, so the one caveat I have is I think there are actually a decent amount of these types of things that exist in Dota that teams abuse that do not come to light.
Yes. I have found this out. Yes. That there are a lot of things that teams know about, that they hide, that there are mechanics in the game. I found out recently that there are things in the game that are wrong, as in Valve puts out patch notes, and everybody talks about, of course, like, oh, they put out the patch notes, and what actually is in the game is wrong. There are teams that actually figure out those things, that of what things that are in the game that are actually not in the patch notes, and hoard those.
Yep. So I kind of understand where he's coming from with the perspective is like, if everybody is doing this and that's just Dota, and like, is it his job to go around and like police? Is it BetBoom's job to go around and police all the other teams to make sure they're not doing the same thing? And whose job is that? Like, in a world where all that would be policed and none of it would be allowed, I would prefer that. But in a game as complex as Dota, with how many bugs exist on a daily basis, that how many weird interactions exist that you can't account for, like, this stuff is going to happen. And people are going to figure it out, and they're probably going to use it. And I'm just saying, I'm not excusing the behavior, and I don't think anybody on team should do this. I would never do it, and I think there's a lot of players who wouldn't. But I think people also underestimate how frequently it happens, and like how many players are like, oh yeah, I found this weird interaction, and like it allows you to do this, and I've been using it in this tournament, and like I can't believe nobody else knows it, and it's in that gray area of like some of these aren't clear and like broken advantages. They're just like an interaction that makes a spell work in a certain way that is it intentional? Is it not? It's like very weird, certain items that behave with spells that change how they work, that are like supposed to only work in one way, but you can get them to work in another if you do something in the right order or the right way or whatever. These things are such a weird gray area, and there's too many of them to ever get rid of them all. And teams are going to find them. And when they find them, the team has to determine if it's an actual bug or not. That part, I think, is just like, I don't know how or who polices that. I wish there were a way to do it, but I don't know how to do it. And does this fall somewhere in that category? Yes, but is it on the...
I was about to say, I don't think it does fall in that category.
No, but what I'm saying is it on the end of the spectrum where it's like, this is kind of just bad? Yeah, it's there.
It's definitely one of the most blatant ones I have ever seen.
Yes, it's insane. It's bad. It's real bad. I'm just saying he probably feels like people are doing this shit all the time. I'm just explaining the Dota player's perspective.
Sure. I get it.
Not justifying it. I wish this shit didn't happen. I think there should be a way to like police it more, but there are just way too many. And again, I think just people underestimate how many times this probably happens in any given tournament. And most of them are maybe inconsequential. Maybe some of them create some small advantage, but there's not like blatant cheating going on.
So this doesn't constitute as cheating? I'll tell you, I think it constitutes as cheating.
I think it does.
I think it does.
I think it does. Yeah, I think it does.
And
I don't think it's on the hard end, but it does.
Like, if they had been disqualified from this tournament, I would not have disagreed with that decision. Now, if I was in the same spot as the admin, I don't know if I would put it that far. But again, if they'd won that game, I would have given them the L. I would have disqualified them on that game. The fact that they lost it made it easy.
Stuff always goes back to like intent too, because it's like you can always just argue, oh, I misclicked it, like did it on accident.
Yeah,
and then it's like,
I mean, it like
okay,
if he comes out and says he misclicked it twice, like that is entirely possible, and it is, like that sucks.
You misclicked a hockey. We've all misclicked stuff. It's not impossible, by the way. It's not.
Yeah, like maybe he at level 11 he thinks he's level 12 or something, or
right. I don't know,
but
like maybe he didn't even know about the bug, and it just fucked it. Like he fucked it up in a sense of like he didn't realize you could do it
automatically.
Yeah, like I doubt this, but like I'm saying that stuff is also why this stuff is hard to police.
Sure,
it's the same reason a lot of the match fixing stuff was hard to police, because it's like, how do you prove the intent? How do you prove the causation more than just the correlation? And very difficult in Dota when you literally just can't tell. There's no way to tell if somebody clicks purposely or accidentally, if they're feeding first blood purposely or accidentally. Like, you can go gather evidence and like do these stuff, but from a pure gameplay standpoint, it's hard unless it's something that is repeated and very blatant.
Yeah.
If they're consistently doing something, then that's how you can build evidence for this stuff. Someone's consistently abusing something in game, but like a one-off, the guy can always just be like, I didn't know, man, I misclicked, and then you can't just eliminate it. You can't ban a team from Dota off that. You can't disqualify them from your tournament. Like, it sucks, but I just don't think you can. Penalize them, sure. You for sure penalize them. The degree to that, I think, is up to tournament admin. But
yeah, I think the Dota thing is also interesting as well, because Dota has this kind of weird thing. And now, obviously, we've gone away from the DPC, but there's always this weird thing that tournament organizers don't want to make too big of a decision, because Papa Valve He's always sitting there in the corner. Doesn't talk to you that often, but if you make a big decision that goes against what Papa Valve wants, you know, they're gonna let you know. You know, so I do wonder if like this was a Valve tournament, what Valve would have done in that same situation. You know, would they have come to the same conclusions that ESL did? You know,
I don't. They might have been more strict, to be honest.
I think they would have been more strict.
Yeah,
but
again, if you're a random TO, you have no incentive to enforce a stricter punishment. You have every incentive to enforce the least strict, because you want to run the tournament, you want the teams in the tournament, and you don't want to over enforce and then have Valve come in and say you over enforce.
Yes.
You rather under enforce and have Valve come in and say, actually, we want this penalty.
Yeah, and then it falls on Valve. It's like, oh, well, Valve made the decision.
Yes, exactly.
It's out of our hands. Yeah.
Exactly. So you never have an incentive to over enforce, which is like, yeah. So, I mean, of course.
All right. Well, I feel a little bad. We talked about in depth about every single team, and then boom, it said nothing about the team and just entirely about the bug abuse. But I thought it was a pretty interesting topic, so I wanted to get into it. And I'm gonna look forward to getting other pro players' perspectives on it, because, as you said, I know there are a lot of players that would be very mad about that. That would be like we play against you on the regular. How could you do something like that? You know?
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's furious dudes out there, and I'm sure there's also some dudes who might have known about it.
I would have done the same thing, brother.
Yeah, either chose not to or maybe would have chose to, and might come out and say something. So like, it's just one of the, I don't know. I wish this stuff just didn't happen in Dota, but look, I that's the world,
Highly competitive game with a lot of money on the line. People are going to do whatever they can to win sometimes. So, and that's just the name of competition. All right, this went on quite long. That was ESL 1 Birmingham. We just wrapped up groups. Playoffs are going to be starting. We'll do another one probably after playoffs. No announcement yet, but Avery and I are going to be doing a stream sort of thing for ESL 1 Birmingham. We haven't given the go-ahead to make an announcement about that, but look for that. And yeah, thanks for watching.